Thank you, Eli. You know, when Rory this morning was talking about 30-foot waves and things like that, that's how I feel whenever Eli gives me a talk title. It's like, I look down and he said, what's he put me down for? It's like, oh, all right, there's a wave I've got to ride on. So I don't remember what the title was. It was something about masculinity and the apocalypse, I think, which is like, whoa, there's a 30-foot wave to try and ride. So I'm going to do my best because I really enjoyed being around such respected teachers and speakers and elders as we had speaking earlier today, and I really love the balance between the speakers. So I'm going to try and weave a little bit of what I'm doing into what they were talking about. I've got to speak more. I've got to speak up. I'll try. All right. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm shouting to you at the front. Okay, so I'm going to try and tie in with what they were saying earlier a little bit, but obviously there was a lot about earth energies, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about some of the masculine side to that, because a lot of the stuff we've been looking at is about the goddess and the feminine and Gaia, and we don't really see where the masculine necessarily slots within all of that. So I'd like to add a little bit of that in today if I can. So I think what I'm really going to do is end up weaving in with them rather than starting off there. And I'm going to start off sharing something that's a bit more about a general understanding of what I mean by the masculine, because it's something where there's a lot of talk about the masculine and the feminine in recent years without a huge amount of clarity over the real differences between them. So I'd like to share with you some of my experience of working with these energies for 25 years now, or actually being in a gendered body for my whole life, but working specifically with this subject for a long time and really having a lot come up in recent years that shows me understanding the balance of the masculine and feminine for each of us individually and in our relationships, to me, is an essential component of us being ready for the coming change. Because without a balance in there, it's the same as not being balanced in your mind or your emotions or in your body. If we're not balanced in our gender energies, then we're as vulnerable as if we'd done no work in our emotions, no work in our mind, or no work in our body. And maybe some of that may be reflected in some of the relationships that you've experienced in your life, just through perhaps not understanding how gender works for and against us when we don't understand how it moves naturally through us. So the session I want to give, the session or the process I want to go through with you now is a real clarification of the essence, the nub, the distillation of gender from the teachings that I've lived in recent years. And it is a mental healing process. It is a revelatory process, and it's one that will plant a seed for some of you that will hopefully grow for many years. And if not, hopefully you'll find at least a few interesting points in there. I used to give this talk as a talk called The Return to Indigenous Mind. And you remember last time I was talking about natives and how really everything that people are calling alternative these days, I think, is a real spelling mistake. For those that weren't there, all these people, a lot of people who are here today might identify themselves as being part of something alternative. And yet, as soon as you call yourself alternative, you make yourself the smaller second choice. You give away the center ground. You make out like you're something on the fringe, when what I've discovered in recent years is that really what's happening, and what to me has been beautifully demonstrated by every single speaker out there today, is that what we've been living through is the return of the Western native. They're not alternative, they are natives. So when we've got this wound in the West where people refer to indigenous people without referring to themselves, or people refer to natives without referring to themselves, this is a wound. It's not because you're not native, it's not because you're not indigenous, it's a wound. And Rory alluded to it earlier, and my tradition, the Toltec tradition, is really steeped in an understanding of what he referred to as the mind virus. And that's something Toltecs and other natives have an awareness of. Some of them call it the wetico or the parasite or something like that. And it works a little bit like how a cordyceps or a liver fluke might work in other animals, which is it can trick us and hijack us in different ways that behave in ways which become harmful to ourselves and our environment, which is kind of what parasitic entities do and what native entities tend not to. And so what I've discovered in my journey, and my struggle and my shame and my kind of struggle to come to terms with my own journey and process, trying on the garments of other traditions or other people's ideas, or even new age notions of some, spiritual dissolution into the ether or something like that. Trying on all these garments and everything feeling good for a bit, but not really bringing it all home. And for me, it wasn't until I realized that the journey that we're all on for me is that the return of Western nativity, really, which is a remembrance of the fact that we are all native, and that the reason we're not aware of that is because we were colonized so long ago and the bridges were seemingly burnt that we've just forgotten. And that what we're doing when we're trying on the chants of other traditions, or we're trying on their drum methods, or trying their songs or their methods, is really trying to find our own. And I've met with natives and elders in other countries, and they love to share what they've got, but they don't necessarily want us to walk away wearing their garbs. They want us to help heal our disconnections, our connections with our own ancestors, our own spirit, our own land, and our own brothers and sisters of our own people. And that's certainly some of the gifts that I've received from it. But what I saw out there today were mature, developed, confident, competent Western natives, every one of them. Rory, Maria, Juliet, and even Giles for his short interlude in the rain. All people moved by the unseen forces within and without them and around them, just like natives are. And Julia's a beautiful synthesis of the wisdom of everyday plants as being everyday magic, which is real magic. And for us to find the humility of finding those rhythms again and coming home to that. That's the homecoming, really. And I think the trauma of the world and the trauma of our culture and the allure of energetic processes, it's really easy to get into spiritual escapism, or to try to come on then, take me away. Come on then, are we done yet? Come on. Dissolve now. But as many of you who have journeyed in many different ways will find, no matter how high you go, no matter how far out you go, no matter how deep you go, you always wake back up here. You open your eyes and you're here. Because this is the arena. This is where it's at, right here. And we get these tasters, spiritual work to touch base back home, mother work to start to feel safe and held where we are, connection with each other, all of these things, so we can finally get here, finally arrive and feel at home here. And for me, where we are at I mentioned it in the last talk a little bit, but for us on our journey of mental acuity and knowledge about ourselves and the world, our emotional understanding, our empathic range and wisdom these days, our bodily dexterity and skill, our ability to heal and treat it, all of these things are at high levels of development. And the one thing for me that is lacking in there, the one thing that's fallen behind, is our gender understanding. And if we look at our mental competencies, our emotional competencies, your skills, your crafts, each of your abilities and talents, they may be very refined and developed, but can I just invite you all to glance at your relationships for a moment? And how many of them for us are at the place that we would like them to be at. And this is the importance of gender work, really, is realizing that in a way it's about saving your life, just like everything else is. When you're doing emotional work because you're depressed, you're saving your own life because you're saving your own suffering. Every moment that you can reduce the amount of your future suffering, you're saving life that can then be lived with joy, positivity and connection, instead of wrapped up in disconnection, contracted, moping, off. Spent many years in one of them myself. And so really, by turning attention to this, no matter how difficult or awkward or uncomfortable, the fruits are enormous, because it's to reduce your suffering and reduce the suffering of the people that you're in connection with. So that's the spirit and the intention with which I'm sharing this with you today. You can do with it as you see fit. So this is a gender healing process we're going to do, but it begins in the mind, because that's where the wound is for most of us. And it's because your body isn't lying to you. We do get confused between feeling and emotion, and I'll maybe get into that a little bit later, but in terms of pure feeling, there's no lies happening in our interaction with each other. It's the story we tell ourselves about those feelings that start to create the problems, and it's then how we spin off in reaction to our own stories about what somebody's glance meant or what somebody's behavior meant. That's where the suffering begins. That's it. So we're going to look today at the absolute mechanism of how that happens. And then you can maybe start to go and play with it. You might be able to see how it's turned up in your life, and then we will maybe have some tools for moving forward. So this is really about, what I'm going to share with you today is for the past, it's for the present, and it's for the future. It's something that will help you in each of those areas, I would hope. And if not, we'll go question time at the end. All right, so it's a gender healing journey, but to get to the bottom of it, as Rory said earlier, he mentioned a mind virus. You know, and that's the thing. I mean, how many of you have gone to a spiritual event or some retreat and you've been told to leave your mind outside? Switch your mind off for a bit. And so, well, that's all well and good. And yes, we can do that, but I am going to have to switch it back on again at some point. When I go out of here, it's going to be there. So what can we do about that? That's really my area. That's what we do here, is give the mind something. Because what ends up happening is that a lot of the practices that we get offered by the mind not being in alignment and not understanding what's going on, we're not able to get the full benefits. We're actually not able to get it. We'll get a portion, we'll get an amount, but not the full benefit unless everything is in alignment. So if you think about it like you're going shopping, you've got some heavy bags of shopping to lift. And I think most of our lives today could be construed as heavy bags of shopping right now. So if you've got a heavy bag of shopping and it's over there, and you try and pick it up like this, how hard is it? It's pretty difficult, isn't it? Whereas if you can get behind it and get aligned with that bag and then pick it up like this, it's much easier, isn't it? And this is the importance of each of us paying attention to each of our aspects, because if any of them are left behind or out of kilter, what we're dealing with is much harder than it needs to be. So for some of you it might be mind stuff, for others it might be emotional, for others it might be physical stuff going on, trauma in the body or other things. Whatever it might be, I invite your attention to it, because the benefits are you're reducing your own future suffering, which is surely the best prize in the world in a way. Okay, so to go on our little journey today, we actually have to head in a bit of an odd direction. Have any of you, can I just ask, have any of you done this with me before? Maybe, all right, okay, so sorry if it's a repeat. Yeah, that's the kind of expression that we want to have. That's exactly it, yes. Our journey begins here, because the problem's in our mind. How many of you were taught that these are basic shapes? Yeah? You taught these basic shapes? Yeah? Okay. They're not. And our problem lies within that. So first of all, what do I mean by a basic shape? So everyone know about primary colours, basic colours? So the rule of them is they cannot be reduced to another colour. And so it's true for the shapes. So the shapes, it should be true that they cannot be reduced to another shape. That's when you're dealing with the true basic shapes. So, if I were to say to you that one of those is a basic shape, which one would you say it is? Have we got any triangles or squares? Thank you. There has to be some, otherwise the laws of the cosmos are broken. There must be at least 1% or 2. It's a circle. Okay, it's a circle. We'll get into it in a second as to why. So the circle, we're going to put down here. Okay. Now, if I was to say to you that these two can be reduced to another shape, what shape can they be reduced to? A line. A line. Okay. And let's get rid of these for a second. So, the point of this, we're going to have to imagine that they're rubbed out, because I'm unlimited chalk here. We'll just call them diffused into the background. No, I can't wet it, because if I wet it, it's not going to dry in time. The chalk won't work. And this is my chalk supply. Okay, so this is it. This is the containment field for today. Yeah. I like the limiting parameters of the cosmos. Yes, it's like, they do it with this. Okay. Let me just have a swig here. All right. Now, just before we get into these for a second, if I was to, let me just cover these a second with something. Let's just cover these. Okay, let's cover them for a second. That is. What could it be? This one. What could this be? The moon, what else? The sun, what else? An apple, a ball, a Mexican wearing a hat from above. Could be any number of things. And it's because when we are dealing with the true basic shapes, they turn up everywhere. And they work in your mind in a particular way that the others do not. If I drew a triangle on the board, we'd have a much shorter list. Much shorter list. Yeah? And then if I just get rid of this for a second, and I go, in fact, we're going to bring these back from the diffuse field for a moment. And then I go like this. Okay? So, how your mind processes number compared to how your mind processes shape compared to processes character are completely different tracks of mind. And these operate at a rational level of mind that is not where the indigenous mind is. This is where the disembodied mind operates, and it talks about things. It refers to things, which is not how the indigenous mind works, which is fully embodied, feeling, seeing, sensing, all the rest of it. So the problem for us is that all of the shapes we've been given all come from a second tier of mind. So that means that when you're trying to express your innermost aspirations, your highest convictions, your deepest needs and desires, they're not properly plugged in to your embodiment. And then you're wondering why you're not being effective, the change isn't happening, that your spells aren't working. Because these are all spells. We spell all our words because all our words are spells. And spells, things people said to you many years ago, or why you think poorly of yourself. Spells, things people said to you long ago, or why you treat yourself poorly or others. Spelling work is really important. And all of our spells are based on shapes. All of them. So, by healing the mind and returning to indigenous mind and imbuing the things that we might learn here today, what can start to happen is we become more effective in our spelling. Others can feel us more, rather than us being in the silent sharing connection field, because a lot of people can feel connection and all the rest of it in the silent field, but when they bring speech into it, they start to lose the feeling of connection. And it's because the spells aren't plugged in. They're not, it's like most people when they're playing around with language stuff, they're playing around with applications in an operating system, whereas this is machine code. This is like getting way beneath the operating system into the machine code. So for example, every culture in Europe all share the same machine code. They all share the same 26 characters of the alphabet, every one of them, but they can't understand each other. Same machine code, different operating system. And this work today is to get into the machine code. So when I asked you what that was, without context or relationship, it was activating your machine code. And it would say, well, it can be this, it can be that, it could be this, it could be that, it could be that, it could be that, it could be that. Because on the next layer, it could be any of those things. So today's process is going to delve us deeper into this. And the thing about a machine code upgrade is that you can install a new application, it doesn't change the operating system. You can upgrade the operating system and it might be a bit more effective. You change the machine code, everything changes. Everything changes when you change the machine code. So, let's go back to our line in our circle. So these, my dear brothers and sisters, are the most ancient of shapes. They precede all known languages. They turn up on cave etchings. We were in Avebury yesterday and saw both of these etched in different ways on stones. Lines and circles. They are how nature built, in the masculine and the feminine. And in a way, this is not the true circle you see in nature. The only time you ever see this type of shape in nature, truly, is a bubble. It's a bubble, which is kind of what the mind is in. Every other shape in nature is what Maria was talking about, which is concentric rings. That is the real shape of the feminine in nature and how it builds. So you could open an egg, a cell, a tree, a planet. You're going to find this shape. It's the shape of form and forms. Atom, egg, monad, all these things, cell, all this shape. So that's the real shape of the feminine that we see in nature. We're going to get on to where we see this in nature, because a lot of people in recent years have been saying there's no straight lines in nature. And it's madness. It's part of the war on the masculine. It's part of the collaring and the cuffing of the masculine. For those that weren't there last time, one of the big things in my journey was, as a young man, being brought up as what I now call a femi-man, which was to be completely ashamed of masculinity, to have derogation of men in the masculine, to have blame as well as shame. And when I hit my teens, I realized that it was men that couldn't get in places unless they were wearing certain clothes. It was men that had to wear the shirt and trousers to get in somewhere. And I looked at the shirt and I was like, well, what's this part called? Well, this part's called the collar. And what's this part around the wrist called? Well, that's called the cuffs. And it's like, well, who wears a collar and cuffs? And is tied around the neck on their collar? Who? In our language, who? Slaves and prisoners. Is there any other context apart from BDSM? No. I have to throw that one in there because somebody will usually throw it in there, so yes. So aside from that one, that's not the method of social control. We would all know about it if it was. No, slaves and prisoners. And we live in a graded collar system around the world. Blue collar, white collar. All the police are known by their collar number. I'm not making it up. I'm not saying anything about it, other than what do those words mean? And if they were made of metal, would it tell you with more information about what they meant? Because they're the right shape and they're in the right place. And you can look up in history and you can find out what people were wearing 600 years ago, 400 years ago. You will not find the origins of the collaring of the masculine out there. And why is it only the men? And you don't see any world leaders out uncollared. They're all collared and cuffed. Yes?
I hope I'm not interrupting your flow, but what this is reminding me of is as soon as I was 11, for some children, male and female, it happens earlier. As soon as I went to secondary school, collared, cuffed and tied.
Yeah, that's it. Because it's the masculine that is being collared and cuffed. It began with it just being the men, but what is actually being collared and cuffed is the masculine energy, which we're going to get into in a moment. Believe it or not, these are going to take us there. Okay, so you do get straight lines in nature, and what they do is they bring structure, order, boundary. They stop things from becoming essentially cancerous. They stop things from becoming a blob, a homogeneous blob. The masculine is the source of all boundary. Okay, it's the boundary. In a way, this isn't really the feminine. The feminine is the whole field. This is something, this is like a masculine boundary that contains one part of the homogeneous feminine from the rest, but we won't go that far into it today. So the point is, these turn up all over the place in our psyche, in every language. They turn up in our technology. All technology is based on this. All of it. All of the things that are ensnaring our children are based on the line in the circle. All of it. All number is bound by the line in circle. Circle, line, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, line, circle. There are no other numbers. None. No other numbers. They're bound by these. When they come together in balance. So in my tradition, Toltec tradition, these are actually about electromagnetism in the human form. The masculine is the electrical, the feminine is the magnetic, and this is the symbol for the electrical, which we'll get to in a moment. This is for the magnetic. And when they come together, which we see on our electromagnetic devices, you get this shape. What do we call it? Power. Power. Power is what happens when the masculine and the feminine come together. Now, when they are in balance, which is everywhere in nature except our species, you get the third natural basic shape, which is in every element in nature and in every kingdom. It's in the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, it's in water, air, it is in fire, it's probably in earth. And what shape is it? The spiral. That's right. What you get when they are in balance is you get the line that arcs and the circle that cannot complete itself. You get the spiral of life. Now, we have a name for the ratio for that, but we also have a shape for that ratio, and the shape is this. It's the perfect penetration of the masculine and feminine. The perfect balance of masculine and feminine everywhere in the cosmos, except our species, where the men are collared, everyone's blaming them, and nobody knows the native shapes. It is a mess. Other things are looking good, but this is a mess in our culture. Thank you for that, yeah. So, these turn up everywhere in nature. And they even turn up in our mind in different ways, because, yeah, I'm not going to get too much into that just now, actually. But these are the native indigenous shapes. You find them everywhere in nature and in other places, in other spaces. Spirals maybe aren't that important. Gender maybe isn't all that important. Maybe if you're from the Eagle Nebula or something like that, or some plasma field somewhere else. But here, where the galaxy is a spiral galaxy, and the Gaian forces all move in spirals, including the animals and the plants, it's probably worthwhile trying to work out what that's about and getting into alignment with it, especially if you're not feeling in alignment with it all. And when Rory's talking about getting into position to align for the wave that's coming, for me, it's about noticing the movement between these forces, which we'll talk about in a bit, and getting ready, positioning ourselves to be able to ride that when it comes. Because we have to get the balance right between them, but we have to understand the difference between them first. So what is the difference between these two shapes and every other shape you were taught? Squares, triangles, hexagons, dodecahedrons, parallelograms, octagons. What's the difference? There's no end. What else? No, this one is. But yeah. No end is one of it. What else? They're not contained. So what? That's a great way of putting it. They're not contained and they've got no end. So what the masculine brings to the natural shapes here, which are forms and states, which has a beginning and an end, has a fixed place, is contained. What they bring is change. They bring change so that you never end up in the same place as where you started. And every other shape, and this is the maze of the mind, this is the trap of the mind, is that every other shape you were given to build with takes you right back to where you started. The triangle, the square, the parallelogram, all of these take you right back to where you started. Whereas these are the shapes of change. And it is the electrical energy of charge that brings change. So when we talk about taking charge and what is collared and cuffed, it is your charge for change. Your energy, your desire, your resource for change is what is being hijacked to maintain a form, to maintain a state. And what you'll find is the state will use forms to maintain itself. Paper forms and uniforms to maintain a state. And if you seek to maintain that state with your charge for change, you will be paid and well rewarded. But if you seek to change that state with the charge for change, you will not be paid and rewarded for it. So don't expect it. Don't expect it. And another thing that's really important to realize on your own journey, and you will have faced it in yourself, is that this is change, this is state. They always resist each other at first. State resists change. Your own state resists the very changes you want to make, doesn't it? Yeah. How many of you had changes that you've wanted to make for years and you've not done it? Yeah. Right, so the rules as above so below, as within so without apply here, And that is, if you have resisted your own change for so long, then we cannot expect the world out there to just all of a sudden light up at your first sharing. Despite how disheartening that might be. We're going to have to cut some skin for that one, people, because there's a lot of resistance. But it's natural. It's not actually behavioral. It's natural. It's energetic. So if we can tune into that, we don't take it personally. It doesn't affect our fuel. It doesn't affect our belief in ourselves or the worth of what we're doing. We can realize, oh, I'm bringing change, and therefore there's going to be a bit of resistance. That's all right. Because what we really want to get to, I mean, really and truly, what happens is these shapes actually evolve. We'll maybe get into that a little bit, but yeah, I'll save that. I don't want to go too far ahead here. Remind me, I'm going to put this little, remind me about this at the end. I need to put that shape in there. Because this is to tie in with the horseshoe shape that Maria was talking about. So, the masculine energy in all of us is the charge for change. And so most of your feelings of upset, whether it's anger, sadness, depression, anxiety, most of them are all simply the desire for the world to be different. I wish it was different. I wish you hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish they weren't doing that. But the feeling for it is the fuel. That's the charge. And if you can't take that charge, then you're not going to be able to bring the change. And if you are, yeah, we'll get on to why we can't take charge. This is what's been collared, is your belief in your ability and the worth of your ability to take charge. Because, here's something, if I do this. Tiny little deed, but the world has changed, and it will never be the same again. Cups do not move themselves. That will sit there until it dissolves, until somebody else comes along and does it. So for those who would seek to maintain a state over you, and for those who would seek to maintain a state in the world, they know they cannot have you awakening to your creative power for change, because they can't stop you. So it's much easier to make you believe it's not worth you even trying. That's the collar and cuffs right there. What's the point? Can't be bothered. Nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to care. It's not about other people. It's about your desire for change. And if you're not willing to act on the tiny kernels of it, if you're not willing to tend the spark into a small flame, you're never going to get to the fireworks that you really want. There's no real shortcut there. So, let's see what that looks like. Let's look at this shape that we've not really learned much about at all. So we're going to come back to this, but let's get onto this one. Okay. This is a fractal shape, just like the circle is, but it works differently to the way the circle did. The circle works in the feminine within you, which is the kind of ephemeral field of shape and feeling. So that was very much about, oh, it could be the moon, it could be a wheel, it could be whatever. What can I dream this into out of the field of feeling? When we're talking about the masculine, we're talking about drawing a line and making a point. In Toltec gender, they say the main difference between the male and the female is that the male has something pointing out. And so that means when we are communicating, because communication is a gender thing, and that's why we talk about helping somebody else to conceive. If you want to help somebody else to conceive, you need to understand gender. And that when we are wounded in the lower centers and the biological levels and the emotional interaction levels, then we can't get the higher correspondences of this divine energy that flows through every level. If you don't get the lower, you're going to be muddied on the higher. And when you're trying to share with others your desire for change, you're trying to get them to conceive. You want them to have a conception that you have a point that has worth. You don't understand gender, it's not going to work. You just got people chucking points around. And nobody's conceiving, receiving, really receiving. So, the masculine in you is moving whenever it's time to draw a line. The feminine is all about the energy of acceptance and everything is perfect right now. How many of you have done a meditation or something that's invited you to tune into the perfection of the now? Yeah? How many of you have achieved it? I have. I don't think it's actually a pretty accessible thing, guys. You should give it a go. It's actually possible to tune into the perfection of the now. I invite you to do it because it does bring relief and solace. It really does, because there's a deep truth in that. But when we come out of that, we have all the things that we'd rather not accept. I wish there's more money in the bank. I wish bombs weren't being dropped. I wish there was certainty and security. I wish whatever we wish wasn't happening. So these two things coexist. Whenever it's time to draw a line. The first time we taste this, the first time we taste line drawing energy, is as children. And as children, we're all born into the feminine. We have to accept everything. We have to accept it all. Until which word? The magic word that means no. And that's why kids love it, is because it's their first time they're being offered the masculine. And that dog has an issue with the masculine. We already know that. I don't know if any of you know. It definitely has an issue with the masculine. It's okay, though.
He lives in feminine,
He does, and that's fine. Yes.
You said no, you see.
Oh, is that what it is? See? Yes to you. You can have whatever you want. So no is the first word that says, I don't accept. How many of you don't like saying no? How many of you don't like this? Yes. Okay. Thank you for your honesty. It's not the word, it's the feeling. And it's because we're not skilled with it. So what happens is we oscillate between absolute connection and absolute disconnection. And the fear is that if I say no, we're going to be cut off. I'm not going to feel connected anymore. And it's the feeling of the masculine we don't like in that. And some of you who are very skilled at saying no, anybody here who's quite comfortable and confident and powerful with it? Have you found people call you aggressive or things like that? Yes, you get called it. Yes, yes, just because of your comfort with boundary. Which is to say, I just don't accept that. You know, there doesn't have to be any extra charge in there when it's skillful. So anger is a good example because people get so little practice with anger. It means that they see poor examples of it demonstrated. They're not able to see many good examples of where it can be really well used to bring healthy, necessary change. And it's the same for the no word. And that is, it's really good. And it doesn't mean absolute disconnection with skill, as with our talking about feelings that can be uncomfortable or learn to sort out our self-attacking thoughts. It's the same with this, is that we can sort this out and realize, yes, this feels uncomfortable now. Yes, I feel completely exposed now. But this is about me taking care, by me standing up for my values, by saying what I won't accept. And that is how you tell the universe what kind of world you want to live in. Because otherwise it thinks, do you know what? You're A-okay with all this going on because you're accepting it all. And this is the thing, so many people are talking about the return of the divine feminine, but the divine masculine is as much coming to fore because we need both. And for me, I find it interesting to note that whenever divine masculine gets mentioned, it's really interesting to note the sort of in-joke around it, the sort of chortled kind of scoffing at the so-called divine masculine. Until we lose that, people, we've got no hope. Until we truly understand the necessary complementariness of each other, we're doomed because there's lurking gender superiority, and as long as that is present, then there's going to be campaigning. Somebody's going to be campaigning, and that is destructive. They're truly complementary. We cannot achieve this without each other. You know, men and women need each other for this, and we all need to be able to use both the masculine and the feminine within us to pull it off. Otherwise, we're just going to get swept away by the harrowing.
Unless
you know?
we have a no, and a yes means nothing.
Well, that is true. That's a good one. Unless we have a no or yes means nothing, because it's like, well, you don't have another offer. You know, if all you say is yes, you don't have another offer. You don't have another poll. But no is just the first taste of it. It's much more than that in our lives, because really, when we're looking about change, no is just the beginning. It's just the absolute beginning of it. It's the simplest one of all. Like I was saying, this is really a fractal. And so I can talk about drawing the line, and you know what it means, beyond just drawing a line on a page. If I was to ask you what tool draws the line better than any other, what is the tool? Nope, it's the other one. A ruler. That's right, the compass is a circle. We'll get to that later. It's the ruler. Okay, we're talking in fractals now, again. What position in a state does the ruler have? The one in charge. The one in charge of the state. The ruler is the one in charge. And we live in a culture of the broken ruler, which is where most of us have deep masculine wounds, deep father wounds, deep wounds that cause us to shame, derogate, and distance ourselves or distrust the masculine. And if we can't sort that out, we're not going to get through this. And I'll tell you why later, because it's about the difference between the masculine and the feminine. So the ruler is the one who's in charge of the state. On a ruler, the one that you draw with, there could be any, what else do you do with it? You measure. That's right, you measure. So on that ruler, there could be millimeters, inches, centimeters, yeah? So in maths, the term for them is values. They're values. The ruler measures values. And the world of the broken ruler, which is the one most of you were born into, if not all of you, is where you get to the stage where you do not know how to measure the value of what you find inside yourself. When you do not know how to measure the value of what you find inside yourself, and so you go and seek valuation from others, and then you believe their judgment of you. And you go to have that updated in the hope that their judgment will improve so you can feel valued based on their value. That is the broken ruler, my friends. And as long as you have that, you're not free. You're not even yourself. You know. Saying no, saying I don't accept, is a way of beginning to assert your values, to start to show what you want to see in your life by excluding that which you do not. And it's the only way you can make room for the new, because your life is full. The world is full. The house is full. If you want to make room for that which you seek, you have to be willing to get rid of that which is not serving, and you know it. There's a deep relationship between this no and this no. Okay? They are. We have to balance them. So if I've got a child there, they're hiding in the car. It's the only way I could have got it. It's peace and quiet. But I could say to that child, no, hot, to a fire. Or I could say, no, hot. See the difference? No, sharp. No, sharp. Very different, aren't they? Yes. So there are things that you know you need to say no to. Aren't there? But in other places, your no is getting in the way of this. Fear, hesitancy, doubt. No, I'm not going to do that. No, 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 no. Blocking your knowing. And these, we'll get onto what the complement of that is. We'll get onto that in a second. So, this is where gender balance becomes crucial, vital, between knowing what I want to accept and what I don't based on my values. And your values come through the relationship we'll look at in a second. So they come through your measurement of your life experience. But here's the thing about, because remember we said the masculine was change. Yeah? So, well actually I need to give this context here. So, if I was to give this, I remember I said it was a fractal. So if I was to say this was a letter, which letter is it? I. All change comes from I, the fruit of the ruler. All change comes from I, the product of the ruler. So many people, and I've been there, been in activism 15 years, and I've been there, we the people, critical mass, we the people, critical mass. All we need is 5,000 more awakened and we'll win. No. I've been there 5,000 people. We just need 5,000 more people. Then we'll win. We'll beat their police line. With just 10,000 of us standing here. 5,000 more turn up. Nothing changes until I step forward. And then some other I goes, I'm going to do that too. Right now, we are all in the feminine accepting field until some I gets bored, needs to go to the toilet. Somebody gets cold and wants to put a jumper on. But that's I. I'm cold. I need to go to the toilet. I'm not comfortable here. I think this should be different. All change comes from I, the masculine within you. And yes, we can go and counsel other I's, but you need to watch because you can get lost in the field of we, as I like to call it. Lost in the we. And I've been with many lost in the we for years. And it diffuses people's charge. It swallows charge. Because that's not actually what is being asked. When you get your insights, your revelations, all the rest of it, the revelations, the word apocalypse, your revelations, they've come to you, which is I. They've come to you for you to act on, not to go necessarily and just canvass everyone about it. For action, to bring change, embodied change, in one way or another. If I was to give this a number, what number is it? One. People. What is the whole spiritual story? What are we all? One. You've all only been taught, and every single piece of spiritual text that's been allowed to filter into the mainstream West has been completely sanitized of the masculine one. I. The individual one. The feminine one is the collective whole. The we, all of us are the one. But this is, I am the one. Or the way we would say it collectively is, I is the one, because it applies to all of you. It's about the one within you. The one who is discovering values that they maybe don't know the worth of. Aren't sure how to make those points and draw those lines in their life. And the only way to do that is by learning to take charge and start making some I statements about what you want and you don't want. And you'll start to bring the change, because really what starts to happen is we're all built in this shape, in the form. But when you're born, you don't have this outer boundary. You're not a complete adult cell yet. You're this. And it means that everything coming at you, so in Total Gender we see that everyone is feminine at first. And that is because everyone has to receive everything that comes at them. You have to accept as a baby. You cannot draw lines, you cannot make points, you cannot say no. So everything starts off feminine. And then the masculine emerges from that in a different way from the way the woman emerges from the girl. But when we're all born, we're like this. And it means that everything cuts us to the bone. Everything gets right to the heart. Because we have no boundary. Until, point by point, line by line, I statement by I statement, we start to define our state. Our state. The state that we cultivate through our practice, our magic, our relationship with the universe, and we start to do that. And then what we find is, within our state, we'll find this stuff that's closer than we wanted it to be. And that's where we need to learn how to draw lines, how to say no. So that we can start to get, because if you manage to draw a healthy boundary around yourself, so what I mean by that is, what I mean by a healthy boundary around yourself is, how many of you have engaged in a practice of some kind, meditation or other, practice that's brought you a sense of ease and well-being, maybe strength, safety, connection, and then you've gone shopping and it's gone? Yeah? What that means is you cannot take charge of your state. You can't take care of it. You can't maintain it in the field of bombardment. It means that this, your cell wall, as it were, which if we look at the fractal of the cell in the body, it's a really good fractal of the masculine, which is, it's a semi-permeable electric membrane. That's what a cell wall is. A semi-permeable electric membrane. That's your yes-no field. That's your yes-no gate around your inner sanctum, as it were. And when we're brought up, we're taught to let everybody in there. but it's just not healthy. Codependency, all sorts of trauma results from that but it's necessary because somebody mentioned earlier, who said compass when I mentioned drawing shapes? Yes. So the tool that draws the circle is called the compass. And the compass does two things. There's two types of compass. One draws a circle. What does the other one do? Navigates. Using what? Magnetism. So remember I said the feminine was magnetic? Yes, this is why you can't help but the words can't help but match. So really, our compass is really our feeling. You remember earlier I said about how we arrive at our values? You arrive at your values by being born essentially as an egg with no shell. And you have to feel everything. Everything. That is being downloaded into your compass so you can learn to find your way based on feeling. And what's meant to happen is your feeling informs your ruler. This is like the Queen. So this informs the ruler about what I need to do about this. This doesn't feel good. What do I need to do about this? I need to bring some change. But what ends up happening for most people is there's a massively wounded relationship between these two. Massively wounded. Massive judgment and blame, within the self. So how many of you, when you maybe let your hair down to try something new, or you try and say something difficult or open up in some way, and it doesn't go well, and you abuse yourself for it? Call yourself names. Yeah? That's when compass is moved, ruler judges. I measure that as being less than perfect. Go to jail, go directly to jail, do not pass go, feel like crap, imagine yourself exiting the planet, please. I don't know how bad your trauma is, that's mine, but okay. So, through feeling and our compass, we find our way. And then we're meant to cultivate values that we're meant to act on. That is the rite of passage into real adulthood, as far as I'm concerned. Oh, yes, there's somebody there. That is the rite of passage, where you, a young spirit in the earth, say, okay, world, I have felt everything you've thrown at me. I have received your points. Here is my change. Here are my lines. Here's my no. Here's my no born of my knowing. But until you start to bring that into the world, your rite of passage into becoming the one here, that personal individual one that you are, that you maybe thought and believed in the quiet corners of your mind at times, or maybe you didn't dare. But in a way, you must heal this, because how many people refer to, the fact that we even put the in front of one is a massive spelling disaster. Because unless you can place yourself at the heart of it, how many of you would refer to the one without including yourself? In the same way as you might refer to a native without including yourself. And we have to be super careful, because when we're speaking about the one, whether it be masculine or feminine, if it is not deeply seated right in the heart of ourself, including ourselves within that, we've accidentally banished ourselves to the edge of creation.
Sorry.
Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt. If you say that again about how many of us have not included ourselves in the one?
Yeah, so if you talk about the one or the universe, or you talk about spirit or God or whatever your words for that are you fully including yourself in that name or that referencing, or is it something outside of yourself? Are you referring to it? And in that, right there, right at that moment, you've banished yourself. Banish yourself from all protective safeties, banish yourself to the edge of creation, so you're then vulnerable to the void whispers. It's hugely important to get that deeply seated within the self, that really and truly you are the one, because how could you not be? How could you not be? If everything is one, let's just do the logic, let's just do the little logical process, but notice the resistance your mind has to even go through the process, because of our association of this with ego. This is not egoic at all. There's zero ego in this whatsoever. For this reason, where do you see this shape when you look at me? The eye. And what color, or what do we call the heart of the eye? Other word, the pupil. The pupil. And what color is the pupil? And everyone. It is the black hole with a W at the center of the universe, peering back through every pupil. That is our equality. That is why I cannot say this to you with any claim or elevation or seeking neither, because I'm eye to eye, people to people. I see the black hole peering back and I'm like, you're just me. There's only one. In a way, we need to correct that word for soul. Soul should be this. And we come in through the planetary soul. You know, I mean it. It's the one. If there's only one, it's got to mean, you've got to mean it, and it's got to apply everywhere. Otherwise, there's something wrong with the pattern. Who was it that was talking about? It was Maria. What did she call that? She called it canon. Was it the canon she called it? Yes. That is what I mean by fractal, and that is when the pattern is just everywhere, on every level and every place. And this pattern is everywhere. Between the relationship between planets, cosmos, all the rest of it is about how these two interact with each other. So, moving forward, if you want to bring change, if you want to crack out of the egg of the cycles of your own life and enter into the spirals, you can't do it without the I energy. Can't do it. And how many of you don't have discomfort around that notion? How many actually have a bit of contraction or discomfort around thinking about doing that or feeling like doing that, going out and making some I statements, making some claims? Thank you for a brave hand. Anyone else? Yes, yes. That is to do with how broken our rulers are. To believe like, it's not us. Can't be me. It is though. That's how, I mean, to me, that is the absolute travesty of how brutal the collaring and cuffing of the masculine energy in all of us is that we can have such hesitation and such kind of shrinking back from something that is naturally, natively yours. It's the seat of your power. The seat of your power is by claiming this so that you become this. With the I centered right within you, that is bringing the masculine home within yourself. Now, I had some notes here. I've scrunched them up because I need to do some weaving back in. It's time to weave back in because I'm aware of some time here. Because I could keep going on these two for a bit, as you can imagine. Let me see what it was here. Okay. Scratch, scratch, scroll, scroll. Okay. Right. So, don't you love it when you can't read your own notes later? Yes. Okay. So, there's an important component here for us kind of... Actually, I've got one more point before I want to move on to this. I want to tie in with something that Rory was saying around prophecy. And long-term prophecy he was talking about. Now, he was talking about it from the consciousness point of view. My experiences of it have been from a more earthly Gaia point of view, from some connections I've had with the planetary consciousness, where I wish you should show me, it was a long time ago now, but quite an initiation ground in North America, but it just happened when I was there. Didn't go looking for that, it just happened. But I was really shown quite a clear image of her dream in a way that I hadn't come across before. And I've seen others now refer to it in this way, but I just want to share it with you to help understand where this ties in with some of the stuff Rory was talking about, as well as what you might be facing in your lives. So, we as consciousnesses are kind of what are called indwellers. And that is that we come into forms and dwell in them. And then our mastery is through learning what they do and getting good with them. You know, and then we might go somewhere else and try a different form out and all that sort of stuff. Whereas planets are form dreamers. Planets dream forms into being for us to indwell. And what the Earth was shown to me, what was shown to me was that, and there's actually an evolutionary biologist whose work covers this perfectly, and that's Lyle Watson. If Lyle Watson's Lifetide book maps this scientifically perfectly, and that is that planets evolve by being seeded more complex blueprints for them to build with of their substance. And so that's why when, for example, people have ET or alien encounters, most of them they encounter are humaniform. And it's because that is the human blueprint that was seeded on a different planet. But it was made out of that planet's stuff. And what Lyell charted is how over the course of ice ages, which he called sleep cycles for the planet, he was saying during these sleep cycles, the Earth was gestating new forms. And when she emerged from each ice age, there were new complexities within her own forms. And they seemed to carry new codes and arrangements that weren't there before. Where did they come from? Now, what Lyell is saying is that these are seeded from outer space. And like the spores is one aspect, but he was saying he'd studied millions of meteorites. And he says they come from places thousands of times more organic than Earth. And during my vision, what was shown to me is that when things come into the planet, there's tons of space dust come into the planet every day, tons of it. We only see the big stuff, meteors, meteorite storms, things like that, but tons of dust comes every day. All of it carrying things from distant stars, suns, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of residues. And unlike us, she can't go for a poo. She can't be sick. She can't vomit it back up. The way of the planet's evolution is she must integrate or die. You must integrate. Must. And what's happened for us is, so for me, the prophecy that we're in at the minute is related to the blooming of the human blueprint, which is that there are known issues in the cosmos as to what happens when this blueprint gets seeded, and that is it flaps about for quite a long time, making a big noise and mess. Big noise and mess as the indwellers try and work out how to handle this form in this substance. We're approaching the graduation, the blooming of our divine self-awareness anchored on the earth in an earthly animal form. For the planet, that is an enormous achievement and upgrade. This isn't about human evolution, what's going on this planet. It's the Earth's. And it is a stupendous stage which is about to graduate, which is the self-realization, the divine realization of some of the forms within her makeup. Now the thing is, that couldn't come about by easy ways, because if you look at animals in the wild, they're seamlessly in their experience. There is no external referencing within them at all. They don't refer to past, present, future, things like that. They have no observer. Now, this is where the weticle comes in, the mind virus, or as the Toltecs say, the parasite. So how many people here have come across that notion before? Yeah, okay, you're familiar with it? How many not? Okay, so the notion is that humans became infected with a virus, a mind virus, many years ago. And it's a parasitic in nature. And if we look at how parasites operate in nature, they keep the host in a low state of well-being as its needs are being met, and it tends to be a bit destructive to the environment as well. The environment would normally be the habitat for the host. When a parasite is in play, then that habitat won't be maintained in the way that a healthy animal would. Now, to understand the role of, because to me, all of us were infected with this and may still be, as long as we have notions of being visitors, you know, because this visitor has hijacked us into believing that we're visitors, because it is. The way a parasite works is it tricks the host into believing that its hungers and needs are the host's. So the only reason, so mistletoe is a parasite, and the only reason a tree feeds mistletoe is because it believes it's a branch. It thinks it's I. And so for humans, when they are pursuing the interests of the parasite, they think it's their own. But it's not. But the difficulty with this is the danger of people not taking responsibility. And I think this is why this kind of awareness hasn't come until now, until we can take this on board without using it as a get-out clause, because we still have to be responsible for integrating this parasite, which is partly what this work is about. And so really many of the natives have the view, and I consider myself one of them, is that we're not dealing with bad people out there, we've got infected people out there. As in with a virus that they're not aware of. And the Toltecs say, they used to say, it's a foreign installation in our mind. And that's these shapes that I was sharing with you, it's a foreign installation. This is the beginning of the healing of that process back into an embodied and felt mind. But the other thing, again, in terms of weaving prophecies, is that now is also the time that some of us are finally able to get on top of the parasite and integrate it. And as a species, as a planet that cannot get rid of it, once it's landed in us, we must integrate or die. And if we look at what's happening to the culture out there that we've emerged from, the parasite is rife. The results in our brothers and sisters is that they're mentally unwell, they're distressed, they're depressed, they're killing themselves, they're sick, they're medicated. Very few of them are happy. That's what happens when we live that way. You know, and those of you that aren't living that way and don't feel that way is because you are of the few that are integrating it, which is to get on top of its hungers and its wishes and all the rest of it. And that's another thing that is supreme about this time from the native point of view, is that finally we might be able to give the parasite the boot that it is long had coming its way. And this, one of the ways of doing it is through understanding your eye, recalibrating your own compass, so that you can start to feel, based on your knowing, whether what you're doing is really coming from you or from the visitor. And I'll show you the way to discern that is, you know, I talked about the two no's. So we've got two no's that we have to balance out, which is, when is my knowing stopping me from saying no, and the other way around. But we also have two eyes. Two eyes, hand for each, leg for each. They share a mouth. You've got the eye that wants change and the eye that doesn't. You've got the eye that wants chocolate, the eye that doesn't. The eye that wants a relationship and the eye that cannot be bothered. We have to balance the two eyes as well as the two no's. But within that, we have to discern, is it mine? And the way that you will know is really quite straightforward. And that is, you're going to feel it. Your compass is going to tell you. Your compass is going to tell you, is this something that is keeping you in a low state of operation? Is this bringing suffering to you? Is it bringing suffering to your environment? Well, the answer's on the table on that one, guys, as to where that's coming from. Whereas the other one is, if you start to make some I statements and you notice that the other happens, you start to feel more connected. It starts to feel good. It felt like a good thing when you said no to that person, or you made that claim that I want this change. Your guidance system is built in. The compass is completely intact. The problem we've got is what I call the spasming ruler, which is, so most people, most of the relationships are governed by emotion. And emotion is secondary. It's not a primary reaction, it's a secondary reaction. And so here's how it works. You feel in the compass, feel something. Then this leaps like a striking match to tell you what that meant. Tells you what that meant, what that person did meant that. And then we believe what we said about it. And then we have an emotion. But here's the interesting thing. The emotion has no direct relationship with the world. It only believes what your eye tells it. Your emotions have no relationship with the world. They only believe what your eye tells it. So you can have the same glance thrown across the room by somebody, and two people receive that glance, and one measures it one way and goes in a big huff and goes disconnected, and the other one either asks about it, inquires, opens up, seeks connection instead of shutting down and believing a story. You've got two completely different outcomes from the exact same stimulus. And one of them creates a big emotional cascade of, I'm going to huff at them because of this, that, and the other. They did this and it meant that, and blah, blah, blah. Did you ask them? Did you ask them? Maybe they had something going on that day. Maybe it wasn't about you. Maybe it had nothing to do with you. And yet the eye, the broken eye, the wounded eye, takes everything personally. It's all about me. It was all done to me. And then we get caught up living our lives in the emotional turmoil of just listening to a crappy story that's not based on the truth. It's just based on the story. So the work that I do with people on gender healing is really about getting back into recalibrating your compass and updating what your eye has to say about it. Because I think for many of us, we've had massive awareness upgrades in the last couple of years. There's so much more that we're sensitive and attuned to, but as long as we're applying old measures, as long as we're applying old values, then we're going to come, I was going to say unstuck, but no, we'll come stuck. That will stick us up, that's for sure. So really, it ties in as well with what Rory was saying about with the lines and how they're moving from day to day. And that's just the level of fluidity we need in our compasses. I need to check in every day as to whether what I said yesterday is still true for I today. It's just fluidity. That's the way it should be, and that's freedom. Freedom is to be able to say, I'm calibrating my compass here. I'm updating it because my ruler was well broken, and right now I need to try some stuff out to check out my readings. You know, because there's just so much within that. We need to give ourselves the space and the time to do so, because there's just so much feeling around right now. But what story are you telling yourself about it? What's your eye saying about it? Is it positive, welcoming, hopeful? Is it judgmental, tyrant? Something like that. I'm not sure which. Maybe your broken ruler. But this is within all of ours reach. The second you go and start making I statements about things you know you should be acting on, I guarantee, despite the discomfort of the microsecond it takes you to say it, the benefits afterwards are phenomenal, because you're starting to establish your state in the world. You're starting to externalize what was previously internal. That is being the change. To have it just held inside is not. You've got to bring it somehow, unless your particular purpose is somehow monastic in some way, which there is a place for that, and I think a lot of people would like to claim that and hide in it when it's maybe not true. And this is where we've got to find what's true for us. So many people I know awoke to something within themselves and then went and got a certificate in something else, because they didn't know how to value what they'd found inside themselves. They didn't realize this can stand by itself in me, and I don't have a name for it yet, but that's all right. You know, that's the real I within there, is to find your own story. So if you just look around for a second, does anybody here look anything like you? Does anybody dress anything like you? That's the uniqueness of your eye, your pupil. So your story isn't necessarily bandwagoning with anybody else. It's really about trying on what others are doing until you find what's right for your eye. So you can establish your state. And then our collective I states will be a healthy body with healthy cells, rather than what we like. So to me, there's only one human on the planet, and we're all cells within it. And right now we've got kidney cells having to go at the lungs, telling them what a crap job they're doing, and we've got brain cells that are all like blaming the heart or something like that. Or is it the other way around? I'm not sure which. But as long as we have any of that going on, we're not in a healthy state. Whereas for each of us, really, the work is your own state. Don't worry about the state out there if you can't take charge of your own state. In fact, I would say it's not safe. Don't go. Not until you can take care of your own state of well-being. And then you can be an interstate traveller. I mean it, yeah, an interstate traveller. Yeah, absolutely. Where you can take your state into numerous other states, but you remain in your state of repose. And I'm not saying avoid the world, not at all, but I'm saying take care. Because in our language, the suffix ion, if I put construct in front of that, we'd know that it's about constructing things. If I put restore in front of it, we would know it's about restoring things. If I put compass in front of it, compassion is the compass. There's no exception to that rule, of that suffix. It is the compass. Have compassion for yourself. But also, be aware that it's maybe time to start drawing some lines. You know? And then once an I is able to take enough charge that they can be a healthy cell, then you might be ready to cross the line. Crossing the line is a different thing. If I cross the line, what are the names for this? Positive. Thank you. This is what positive is. Positive is an electrical term. It's got nothing to do with a happy mood. And the people that tell you it is are usually closet depressives. To be positive is to be able to take charge of your desire and need for change despite how you feel, despite how crap it is, despite how low you feel, despite how the world doesn't seem to be welcoming you. Positivity and taking charge is about you carrying on despite that. That's your real spiritual individuality. You don't need a club. Whereas, while we're waiting around for a club, we're just moping about, my gang isn't here, I'm not playing. I'm not going out to play. Then we're ready to cross the line. There's another word for this though, and it's an important one, and that word is cross. And the word cross is what happens when there is natural charge flowing that doesn't get to move through. We become cross. This is what you'll see. So people who are in charge, bosses and stuff, you'll see it in movies, they'll portray some boss as being cross, angry. Or what you'll see women, if there's a man making an advance towards you and you say no, he might appear cross. He might look like he's in a huff. But he's not. It's not behavioral. It's not. This is bioelectrical in all of us. It's a bioelectrical thing that happens is that when natural charge is stifled, then the system ends up cross, blocked in some way. And so for many of you, some of your feelings of upset, anger, depression, and the rest of it are perhaps your own crossness, your own stuck charge. Because here's something I've discovered in many years of working with this, with countless men, couples, groups, all the rest of it, and that is, no matter what the people around you are going to get your charge, it's going to be positive or it's going to be negative. Only you are in control of which one they get. And so what I mean by that is you might have a feeling about your partner or a friend or a colleague or whatever, and instead of speaking to them directly about it, you just don't talk to them properly for a few weeks. You just kind of, I'm not inviting them out next time. Crap cup of tea for them. I would put a little bit less food on their plate. Whatever it might be, they get your charge. I've seen many examples over the years, and been many examples myself, been many. Yeah. So the people around you are going to get it from you one way or another. And in one of them, everybody suffers. Everybody suffers and feels disconnection. In the other one, there is an opportunity for connection. A window, a leap. That's the gap in the spiral. The leap for the new. But it does require you to gamble, to feel vulnerable, to be honest. To go for it. So before I wrap up, I've got one last thing to say, and then I'm going to finish. Yes. So, and it is to do with something that is another aspect of the more distant divine masculine that's really important, I think, for us to heal. And it's something that's really come online in me in recent years. And it's to do with the clarifying of the credit we give to the goddess and the credit we give to the nameless Lord that so many have shamed and wounded relationships with. That means they struggle to refer to him or to give credit to him in whatever way. And I myself have lived most of my life like that, and it's only very recently that I've been able to even say those words without there being some contortion or trauma reaction within me, just because of my own judgment in the past and my own experiences. And what I've this is so interesting how nuanced this gets, because we often refer to Gaia and the planet as if it's just feminine, as if only the feminine is here and the masculine occasionally visits, and it's not true. If we look at the pagan symbols, especially the ones for these lands, I just want to try and do the Celtic knot, where you have the 3-in-1 sort of thing. It's a terrible Celtic knot, but there we go. So I'm not here for my art skills. So it's about the 3-in-1. That means all three are present everywhere. That is, somebody was referred to, as Rory referred to in divine intelligence, everywhere. No cell missing it. That means if the divine feminine form is in every cell, so is the masculine in every cell. And that's what I've discovered on my journey as well, is that every cell contains the whole. And if we are not able to give credit where it is due to the masculine, then we cannot receive its benefits. It's a bit like if you were mum and your kid is outside shouting for dad. Are you going? You're not going. So if everyone is sitting around giving all the credit to mum and nobody's calling for dad, why is he going to come? Why is he going to show up? He is there. Now, something I noticed was about how to understand the difference and the importance of that kind of divine masculine awareness or attention. And it's to understand that the difference between the mother energy and the father energy in that relationship is that one is personal and one is impersonal. And the mother relationship is impersonal. The fruits are out there. You don't have one, but it wasn't made for you. The mother is there generally. She's there for you, but might get interrupted by another child at any moment. In the stories we have of the past, of the benefits of a relationship with a divine father or masculine, what we have is the remedy to something we don't see in the earth, and that is that the mother cannot take care of all of her children by herself. When the tsunami comes, when the landslide happens, when the volcano erupts, many children get taken out. But some few survive. And we usually, or in modern days, we give that credit to the feminine, but actually, the personal relationship is the masculine one. And it's very difficult to heal. And so what I mean by that is, all the words we use for what I call magic, personal magic, synchronicity. Hate that word, I'd love to set fire to it. Synchronicity. It's the most magic diffusing, nullifying, depersonalizing thing I can imagine when people are referring to something that was about a moment of personal divine attention and magic. It's like the most ungrateful thing I think could be said from my point of view. So, synchronicity, all these terms are used to generalize the attention and the awareness of the universe. When we're referring to things that have guided our path, this is when we are not giving credit to him. Because actually it is the divine masculine that gives the personal attention, that parts the waters, that gets you out, that makes it happen. And you may not be aware of that, but I'm just drawing it to your attention today because it's something that was very difficult for me to heal. Because what I realized is that to truly receive the magic of your life that's so personal and crafted for you, so that just at the right moment that thing would catch your attention so you could meet that person, just at that right moment you got the invitation to go to that event and that happened. All of these things, all of these little moments of personal magic and personal attention that bring change to your life. These are from the divine masculine. And if we don't thank him, if we say thanks, Dad, if we can't make that easy without writhing and contorting because of our wounds and our elevation of the feminine, wanting to place all good stuff comes from her, all bad stuff comes from him. Why would he turn up for you under those conditions? You deserve it, you know? Whereas really what I've realized is what's hidden in those stories is that personal attention is what gets us out. And that's what is meant in all the stories about the benefits of faith, is that in the moment of greatest arduousness, your personal relationship with the one is what can get you through. But only if you have one. You kind of need to have the relationship first. So, in part of this healing for me, I had a massive revelation recently that ties in with this, and I guaranteed I'm finished then. And it is to do with my own wounding around the feminine, and to do with this notion of the beatific, kind of all-giving, abundant feminine. And I suddenly realized that my experience in life is that hadn't been true, but that's okay. But in a way, what I'd realized is that was a fantasy illusion that doesn't exist anywhere in nature. And it's unreasonable for women and men to have that expectation on women or the feminine. And what it does, and what I've seen it lead to in me and in other men, which is why I want to mention it today, is because it's what I see causes men to give up. Causes them to give up. And that's why I want to share it with you, because it's like, this is huge. And it is because this notion that we have of the beatific mother, when that is not true, It means that. So so out there is the mother. Everyone agree? Yeah, mother, manifest form, all the rest of it. So I could put my hand in the bush and I could get a berry, or I could be scratched and cut with thorns. That's the truth of the feminine. I can go out there and I can feel the wonderful cool wet grass on my feet and then stand on a sharp stone. That's the feminine. And if we have an unrealistic expectation that she's all soft and no hard, then men give up because they're like, I thought you were berries and flowers. Yeah, that means you must not be good. You must not be whole woman because I'm looking for the woman that's berries and flowers. Yeah. Whereas, in the same way as we've got to cultivate the skin of the masculine, I don't want to say no, but no. Men out there, I invite you, don't give up. And women as well. Women, the masculine in you that might give up because you put your hand into the bush of life, hoping for a berry, and you get a thorn. Welcome to life. There's no getting away from it. I can go out there and walk 100 meters in beautiful soft wet grass and have no discomfort, and then step on a thorn and it hurts, and I'm going to stop for a few minutes. It's not personal though, is it? And this is that thing is, this is the mystery, this is the unknown. You cannot know when you go out into the bush if you're going to get the thorn or the berry. But if you let that not knowing stop you from trying, stop you from daring out again, then it's over. It's over. You're just waiting to die. And there might be many parts of you, as I know there was for me for many years, that were just waiting to die because of that experience. And so there's the healing of the feminine in that respect, which is to be reasonable with her wholeness, to be reasonable with her, the fact that she has a masculine and feminine pole, just as he does. And yes, he is he and she is her, but they both have the masculine and the feminine, the light and the dark, the hard and the soft, the warm and the cold. They have both, they're woven in together. And we are the third part of that, the little I in the middle, trying to resolve their relationship going on there, the change coming from spirit going, make this change. And we're all like, I'd love to, Dad, but it's quite tricky down here. It's a bit difficult. We're in the middle, trying to temper that wave of change coming and transform it into something healthy. That's what we're in the midst of. But without the balance between these two, without us understanding that we're in the midst of the real importance of this and healing our judgment and expectation of the sexes, I don't really hold out that much hope. But with these brought to bear, gender awareness, recalibrating yourselves, making some bold statements based on what you know needs to change. Come on, where are you? I want this. I don't want that anymore. He says, choking. So, final point, that's this shape. This shape here. Forms resist change. But what has to what can happen is, and all of you will have experienced that, and that is when you, go up to somebody with a point to make for them to conceive with, and they resist it, it's because you're hitting this. And just as this has a second shape, so does this. And its second shape is this, which is the feminine that has opened herself to receive. Open to receive. That's the O. That's the omega. That's the O. That is the omega. And this is the alpha. And the alpha isn't about some hierarchical position. The alpha is about who do you go to first? Who do you turn to first when you need help? Who do you turn to first when you want an answer? Who do you turn to first when the village is defended? That's what alpha means. And so the two of these together are king and queen within you, but in balance, not one or the other. So I'm going to feel, I'm good at starting talks, not very good at finishing them. So that was it. Thank you. Cheers.